All right, today we're joined by longtime friend and colleague, Paul Frields.
How are you doing, John?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here.
This whole meeting kick that I got on, I'm convinced it would have not have happened if I hadn't been the secretary on the Fedora board, I hadn't met you, and I hadn't taken a class at Portland State University. It was like a continuing education class and it was project management class.
Yeah.
But it was a 2-day class called Facilitating Team Meetings or something. And I took it because I was like, I was kind of going through one of those slow periods in my career, and I was just like, I'll take some classes, and I thought that this class was just going to be one of those things where you take notes and go home and feel better. And instead, it was like half or 3/4 of the class was actually facilitating real meetings.
Right.
And in the process of doing that, I got all these like techniques. And I remember coming back and meeting with you because we would have like this weekly session to say, okay, we've got a board meeting next week. What's on the agenda? And I would kind of help run the agenda and steer things.
I think we actually pioneered some techniques when we were working with the Fedora board. And some of those techniques have actually, like, they're really prevalent now at Red Hat. And I'm not sure if I don't know if they were like pioneered in a global sense, but, definitely in Fedora, 100% for certain. And
yes,
at Red Hat, I would not be surprised if we were the first to do some of those things.
At least from the program management team, I'll definitely take credit for it. Because with the board, what we were doing was we were using Gabi, which is running on a box under your desk somewhere at home. And we were using this Gabi server to do collaborative. So I graduated from being the secretary of the board to being on the board.
Yeah.
And at that point, there was no secretary. And so it was like, well, how are we going to do minutes every week? And we'd kind of been using Gabi and Fedora to like collaboratively do schedules and stuff. And so,
do your listeners know about Gabi? Do they know what Gabi is?
Great point.
Yeah, well,
tell us about Gabi.
So if they don't, just to clue people in, just so this isn't like this isn't all in jokes or something like
geek
that.
fest.
We're gonna have some in jokes for sure, but maybe this is not one of them. But so Gabi is like it's a utility that allows people to bring up like a text pad, but they're actually interacting with a server, and that server can be connected to multiple clients. So a lot of people could have a Gabi app up on their computer editing the same document. Now that doesn't sound very revolutionary right now, of course, because we've become used to things like Google Docs, right? And I would assume, I don't know Office Live, but I would assume that it does similar things nowadays. But back in the days that we're talking about, it really wasn't that prevalent. Google Docs didn't exist because this was during the time when technologies like Google Wave had not really happened yet. And it was soon after, I think it was soon after Abi came around that other things started to develop around the same time. People realized that this collaborative editing was going to be important and that it was really helpful for people to get things done.
Yeah, but the interesting thing too is most people at that time were using it for code, I think.
Yeah, you would.
And we were using it to write. I was using it to create schedules. Like I was creating schedules of people around the world.
Yep.
Using IRC and Gabi because we didn't use the telephone.
Yeah.
To create schedules, and then it was meeting minutes, and so Paul and I were strategizing. We would scheme and strategize the week before a Fedora meeting. This is when I was, just to be clear, this is when I was still the secretary, not when I was a board member. But we would kind of, get together and say, okay, so we've got this agenda next week. We've got a couple easy topics here. And then I think the topic that was always on the agenda that was really difficult what is Fedora's target? What is our target audience? Which was like... maybe still going on. I don't know.
Somebody says target audience now. I have a little. My heart skips a beat. Yeah, my eye twitches uncontrollably.
So through this process, though, we started using Gabi, and then I set up a Gabi server internal to Red Hat and started using it for a couple meetings, and then somewhere along the lines, one of my colleagues set up an Etherpad server. So Etherpad is another, I guess, depending on how you trace its lineage, it may or may not have had some relation to Google Wave.
Etherpad kind of arose from the rubble of Google Wave. Like that was one of the technologies that stuck around. And I think they actually like it eventually, probably it impacted or influenced the folks who worked on the collaborative features in the Google apps online, I would imagine.
So anyway, eventually someone set up an Etherpad server inside Red Hat, kind of I don't know if it was a rogue server, just something under someone's desk. We started using it, and then it was like supported by the engineering team, kind of, and then eventually
it got too big to
corporate
kill,
supported
basically.
It. What's
it got
that?
too big to kill.
Yeah, it did. Which is kind of the story of Linux, infiltrating organizations where, someone's running this rogue Linux box under their desk and, for email or whatever, and eventually it takes over the company.
We definitely, I mean, we definitely live the ethos at Red Hat. It's not a lie.
Yeah.
It's not a made up story.
No, it's definitely true. So what are you doing now? So you were a Fedora board member, then you went and did RHEL?
Yeah.
What did you do with RHEL? RHEL stands for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, for those not in the biz.
Right. After my Fedora stint as the project leader, and I finished that, I think, in around the summer of 2010. My manager is Tim Burke, who's now Red Hat's vice president of infrastructure engineering, and which is a real fancy title, but basically he's got like all of the RHEL folks under him, and I think he's got a bunch of other folks like it's always changing, but I think like cloud folks also are under his wing as well, and some other miscellaneous groups as well. I don't know the whole org chart honestly at this point, but anyway, so Tim was my manager at that time, and we sort of built a temporary landing job. We called it an operations manager, and basically what it involved was trying to do some useful cross-departmental work, looking into various metrics, looking into processes that needed fixing. And, in a way, I also kind of worked like his major domo, right? I kind of like to think of myself as like being the wolf from Pulp Fiction, but I don't think I was really the wolf. I think I was more like a plumber, and like there's a little bit of crack showing, and yeah, it was not pretty, I'm sure, for when I showed up to those meetings. But so I did that for a while, and operations manager, we kind of laughed about it after a while because it really sounded like somebody who just like goes and keeps the pipes running and the lights on and things like that. Like it sounded very facility management like. But he came to me in the fall and said, "Hey, I think I may have found something that is going to interest you." And it was essentially being the R&D coordinator for RHEL 7, which, didn't exist yet, right? We did not yet have Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 out the door, but it was coming, imminent at that point. And so he asked me if I was interested in doing this kind of role for RHEL 7, where I would be working with a lot of the managers that I knew in the engineering area, acting as a go-between with the quality assurance folks and Doc's team and product management, working with the product marketing folks. So really kind of being a representative at that kind of functional level. And I honestly didn't feel ready for it, but because the way that I got to Red Hat and because the fact that I loved Red Hat so much and I was enjoying my career so much at that point, the way I got to Red Hat was basically like leaping when I was in fact afraid. I said, well, what the hell, I'll do it again. And so I held my nose and jumped in, and it was great. It was about 4 years of my life that I spent in that role, and very challenging, sometimes frustrating, almost always rewarding. It was really cool, but it required a lot of the skills that I think I kind of learned in working with you, especially when it came to putting together a good meeting, right? You did have to bring a lot of people together and come to agreement or consensus on how something was going to work. It wasn't always easy, and the path wasn't always clear. And sometimes my function wasn't really to drive like a point of view. Sometimes it was really trying to bring together some engineering managers who weren't seeing eye to eye and kind of come up with a way that everybody could lose as little as possible and win as much as possible. And I think that really helped.
So what are some of the other good things that you learned through that experience?
So I learned a lot of times you have to get outside your own point of view, right? I was representing the R&D group, and I found that some of my biggest rewarding moments came when I actually put aside that role once in a while, and instead of just acting like an advocate for what I understood that group's priorities to be, to really try and understand what the person across the table was looking for. Like a lot of times that might be product management, who are looking for a certain capability, and it just doesn't seem possible the way things are built right now, right? And I'm doing air quotes around that right now. The listeners can't see, but I'm doing air quotes. What I think was rewarding out of conversations I had with them was stepping outside that role, thinking about things from their role's point of view, and really just kind of dropping the legacy notion of what we're doing and thinking, well, what if, right? And then thinking through that series of concepts. Well, what if we did this? And then what if following on that, right, we took a different step, and so on and so forth. And it was really amazing that sometimes we could find a better solution than what seemed like the only alternative, which was insanity. I wish I had a good example of this. One doesn't come to mind right away, but
can you think of any examples of maybe a big failure that ultimately turned into success, or like kind of took you to the next level?
So here's an example of a failure that led to something better. Tracking it was a problem for how we were able to kind of trace from requirements or from customer use cases through to the completion of really technical bits of the platform, right? Which are done at the level of like issues in a tracker, right? Or bugs. In our case, in Bugzilla, right? Which is Red Hat's issue tracker for our products. And we use that internally as well. So tracing things through on that long path from what a customer wants, how do you translate that into a requirement, and that requirement becomes like some sort of specification, right? Functional or otherwise. And then there has to be like an implementation that happens. And then, all the technical work that needs to occur in the code to make that happen. Tracing through all of those pieces is really difficult. I think most people who work in large software projects would probably be right with me. Their eye may be twitching right now, and that they're turning this off. So I hope not. We had a really hard time coming up with a system that worked well for anyone to do that, right? It basically worked. It worked in a mediocre way for those of us doing the tracking, and it barely worked at all for people who had to provide input and status for tracking. And we basically sort of kicked the can down the road on that problem inside Red Hat during RHEL 7, and it was pretty painful. But the outcome is that the organization as a whole has a much better appreciation now for needing to have a real kind of life cycle management solution, right? Something where you actually look at what is the customer looking for, and then again translate down that path into what it means for the software engineer or the quality engineer to do their work. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot more buy-in for that kind of system nowadays. And I think essentially it was our refusal to compromise on actually tracking those things in RHEL 7, yet not having a great system to do it, is what kind of broke, like it was the straw that broke the camel's back, more or less, in a positive way, hopefully.
So how did you transition from the RHEL 7? So RHEL 7 goes GA. Your position or your role effectively ends, or you're like, hey, I want to do something new now.
This is like turning into a big explanation of my career path at Red Hat, how I got where I am.
Well, who knows? Maybe someone listening to this wants to work at Red Hat and they can follow you.
It's a great place because, you really can forge new kinds of roles if you're passionate about them and you're willing to do some legwork. In my case, I was coming down the home stretch for RHEL 7. And what that means for us is a public beta, right, which happened in, I think, around 2013. And, our schedule was set at that point, and we knew we were kind of coming in, like I said, the home stretch to the summer of 2014, which was going to be the release, the GA for RHEL 7. And it was around that time that I kind of realized, well, I enjoyed doing this for this product, but I don't think I want to do another one of them, right? Not in this, at least not in this role. And I mentioned it to my manager at the time, who's Denise Dumas, and she's now VP of Linux engineering. And I still work for her in a sense, although like as the company has grown, the levels have grown. Like she's a few levels away from me now, whereas I used to, be one of her direct reports. But I kind of approached her and said, here's where I think I am in my career. I really enjoyed doing this. Doing it again is not my first choice, but it's something I would consider as a backup plan or something if there's really nothing else available. But I told her I would really be interested, I think, in stepping off where I am and getting into a management track, because I'm older than a lot of the people that I know and work with around Red Hat at the engineering level. And beyond that, I have nowhere near their level of skill, right? I was a basket weaver in college. My major was political science. I have a background in computers, just as a hobbyist, and then later as a professional that kind of grew out of that avocation. But I'm not a programmer by trade. I'm more a dabbler. I've been a sysadmin, and it served me well then to have that kind of broad base. But I don't have the skills or the knowledge, I think, to be an engineer at the level that Red Hat needs. But I felt pretty good about my soft skills and my ability to like develop relationships with people and to work, bring people together to work together and pursue specific ends. And so I felt like, well, maybe this is my chance. It's I'm not getting any younger, and so basically, I just kind of approached her with this idea, and a slot opened up, and as luck would have it, that it was the Fedora engineering team. So I knew the project, I knew the people who were on it. I'd worked with them for a long time before that, and it was just like it was a perfect match for what I was hoping to do, and it's been a fantastic couple of years. I've been doing this now, I guess ostensibly, almost 3 years. I've been in this job. Although I do tell people, there was like a 6 months at the top where I was still really involved in RHEL 7, and I basically like all I did was sort of, approve leave and give
approve expense reports.
Just held on as long as I could until I could really concentrate and sink my teeth into what it means to manage people. And I still don't think I'm good at it. Like I've reached I think I've reached a minimal level of proficiency, and I'm still learning.
What do you like most about it?
I think the thing I love most about it is when people on the team get to a successful point that they were hoping to reach, and just like feeling a lot of joy and pride for them. Like that to me is the best part of my week, when somebody attains a goal that they've been trying to reach, and I can kind of celebrate that with them and with the rest of the team. That's my favorite part by far. And I think also just the conversations that we sometimes have, not even necessarily about work, but just about the water cooler, right? Because I'm remote, and most of the team is remote as well. So there is not often a point in time where I really see everybody on the team. It's really our face-to-face comes in video calls during the week. And I really like those because it makes me feel connected to the rest of the team and to the organization.
Well, I think that's one extremely unique thing about Red Hat, especially in the time that you and I first started working together. There were not that many people. In fact, I don't think I knew anyone else that worked remote besides.
Remote work is like, that seems like that's like a whole topic waiting to be plumbed, like to make that happen well. And I my job at Red Hat was my first job in the tech industry, and my first job as a remote employee. And I was petrified when I started. Because I thought, I don't know, I think I'm one of those people who is I'm very neurotic about maybe my propensity to fail at something. I don't know what I think I'm a little hard on myself sometimes about that. It served maybe a lot, and it served
or a lot.
No, John, not just a little. But it served me well, I think, in this case, because I was so worried about, well, how could I fail at being a remote worker? Well, there's many ways to do it. One of them is to just lose your sense of responsibility and getting things done, and turn into somebody who watches Oprah on the couch. Oh yeah, I'll just watch TV while I'm doing this because that'll really help me concentrate and get my tasks done or whatever. It may sound very rudimentary, but I really did worry about that, and I think that just that level of terror prompted me to go further than I would have otherwise, right? To really try and go above and beyond. And eventually I think I found a balance in how to do that properly and have a good work-life balance. But I think a lot of the reason I found that balance is in, conversations with you and talking about, where to spend your cycles to be effective. And it's not just about trying to be present all the time for everyone. It's about choosing the time to be present, choosing the time to be absent, right? And when you're present, what are your priorities? And what are you doing to make it as easy as possible for yourself to drive those and get those done?
I think you hit something really difficult there. I like how you put it, which is choosing not to be present. Because as a remote-y, this is a whole separate episode that we have to do at another time. We'll save a lot of the good stuff for later. But I don't know about you, but me as a remote-y, and this is my 10th year in a row being remote for Red Hat. So I've been with Red Hat 12 years, going on 13. Mm-hmm. Spent 2 of them in the Westford office in Massachusetts, and then moved to Portland, Oregon. But for me, it was, I've got to be on IRC. And so for those of you out there that don't know what IRC is,
it's Slack, but not as pretty.
The modern day equivalent is Slack. So, but that for me, for the longest time, it was like, well, I've got to make sure I'm logged onto IRC, and I got to make sure that I respond. If someone pings me for something, I got to make sure that I respond right away so it doesn't look like I wasn't at my desk. And that also can translate into, well, I better check my email first thing. I need to make sure I respond to email. And you can end up in this compulsive cycle of, you turn yourself inside out into knots. Like, well, got to log into IRC first thing, got to check my email first thing. Yeah. The worst thing you can do on a lot of days is check your email the first thing of the day.
Yeah, it makes you. It's funny because you talk, all of those things that you talked about are about responding to other people, and so immediately you're putting yourself in a reactive role all the time as opposed to being proactive about things. Right, you're subject to other people's whims.
Yes,
and of course, we all want to be of service to people that we need to be, and this is really important to me as a manager, right? To be of service to the people who are on my team. It's not just about what I want them to do. Even more of the time, it's really about making sure that when they are having a problem, that I can respond to them and fix that problem for them, or in some cases, elucidate the problem in some way or illuminate it and throw it back to them and say, okay, I've given you some advice, but this is really your problem to solve, right? But either way, being there to respond is important. But there's a lot to work other than that, right? I mean, you have your own projects that you're trying to get done. And if you're always sort of on call for everyone, you're never on call for yourself. You're never able to be accountable.
Well, it's exhausting. You're in this constant interrupt driven, okay, I got to really, buckle down and get this project moving. And 15 minutes into it, someone pings you for something that they need. So you help them, then I don't know about you, but I find that those are sometimes the most utterly exhausting days where you got absolutely nothing done and all you did was multitask the entire day, but you've got nothing to show for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. That I agree.
Yeah. So we definitely have to come back to this. We definitely do. So to round this, to kind of round us out, maybe bring us full circle, I think there's a great tie in here. You found some great life balance. I didn't even know this about you. You play the bass. And he plays a mean bass, people. I'm going to have to link to some of your SoundCloud recordings.
Yeah, I may be down on my management ability yet. Like I have not yet reached what I would consider a full level of proficiency as a manager, but I think I'm a pretty decent bass player though.
Maybe we should have some of your
That's
people
right.
on
You should
here
right.
Get to
you
the
should,
bottom
you
of this.
Go conduct some band on the street interviews and see what people say.
Yeah. So as I recall, like when you were doing Fedora, like you were all in on Fedora, and you also had some extenuating circumstances with some things that happened during the Fedora time. But I remember kind of as you were leaving and transitioning from that, you said, wow, maybe I went in a little too deep on the work thing there. So I know one of the things that you ended up branching out into was music and playing the bass. Like, how did that come about? And
I've been a musician, I mean, ever since I was a kid. And, I would play, if there was an instrument around the house, I would pick it up and figure out how to play it. And I was in band and marching band and things like that. I was, big marching band geek, hard to believe, right? Big marching band geek in high school. I played clarinet, alto clarinet, some saxophone. When I went to college, that's actually when I picked up the bass. So, I've been playing bass now for, well over 25 years at this point. Yeah. So when I got to Red Hat, I think I kind of fell into that I think you described it as like this pit of work, just really getting ensnared in working longer and longer hours. My work-life balance was a big mess. And as I learned to prioritize and I learned to kind of take accountability for my own schedule and for prioritizing the things I had to do, and that everything is not equal priority, and that there are things that you can let go, right? It's okay to do that as long as you know why and what the risks or the knock-on effects are going to be, and you're willing to live with those. And the people around you that you are accountable to, if they're willing to live with those, right? So eventually I kind of came out of that pit and I realized, man, I really have been not happy. Like I haven't been living a very full and happy life now for a year and a half or two. And I think what's been missing is playing music. And so, really I kind of reconnected with some people that I knew in my area, and ended up getting back into the scene and playing. I even reached out into my local area. See, I always felt that the only way for me to play really was to go back and play with people that I knew well and I'd had successful outings and bands with, and I was doing that, driving quite a bit on the weekends up to Northern Virginia and Southern Maryland to do that. I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is about 60 miles or 100 kilometers for you Europeans, south of Washington. And that's, it's a good ways to go, right? To go play a gig until the wee hours of the morning. And then, you have to pack everything up, drive home. And by the time I was getting home, it was like 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And I thought to myself, man, I wonder if there's I know there are musicians around me. I wonder if any of them are, worth reaching out to and playing with. And so I kind of discovered that there was a really vibrant local scene near me that I just never connected with and never really reached out to. And this is probably a whole other.
So how do you do that? Do you just post on Craigslist? Or
Actually, what I did is I looked around for open mics, right? An open mic session is basically where you usually will have like a musician or a small group of musicians who host an open mic. Like it'll be at a venue and they'll provide the PA gear, right? So mics and speakers and so forth, so you can be heard. Occasionally they'll provide a little other gear too, but you can't always count on it. And other musicians are invited to bring their instruments, their gear, and play, right? And everybody gets a turn, right? You sign up on a sign-up sheet and you get a turn to be heard. Now, if you're like me and you're a bass player, typically you're not just going to get up and play, solo bass. I mean, there are people who do that and they are phenomenal, like, the Victor Wootens of the world or the Michael Manrings of the world, and others. They're phenomenal. but that's not my cup of tea. I don't really enjoy that kind of music. I enjoy being a supporting player. And so for me, it was a chance to go meet other musicians and play their music, right? And sometimes, not things they necessarily wrote, but things that they like to play.
Well, and bass really fills in the gaps. Like, so my wife plays bluegrass banjo, and she's been after me to learn an instrument so we can go to gigs and stuff together, which bluegrass is not, it's growing on me, but it's not quite my thing. But she tells me, like, if you're a bass player, like, people love you. And it's true. I've gone to jams and heard her play with people where when there's a bass player, it completely rounds out the sound of the group in a way with no bass player. So is that kind of like, is that the same with you where like people just loved having a bass player?
You can pick up on this if you look at the entirety of like musician jokedom, like the majority of jokes out there that put down musicians, like the bass player is second only to the drummer. Like you'll
Oh, and banjo players take a lot of heat too.
Do they? Well, maybe it's more equal. Maybe it's more equal than the bass jokes hurt more. Maybe that's what it is. And so I've kind of like they're outsized. It's an outsized population of jokes, in my opinion. But especially being as important as I think bass is to the music, because it really is. It's foundational. If you've got a bunch of drums and a bunch of guitars, it really does. Usually, with some notable exceptions, right? It's not going to sound very good. The bass gives shape to the rhythm. It gives shape to the chords that are going on, and it gives a shape to the melodic and harmonic movement of the song. And so without it, yeah, absolutely. It's
like glue,
and it's it's like the glue you can't do without. It really is important. So, and it's also very supportive, and you can change it. Really, it's a position of great power and great responsibility. I always tell people it's like being Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility.
So you're Spider-Man, and you're just turning up to these open mics, like hoping for people that need a bass player, or like how's this?
Yeah,
like,
and you really you show up to these open mics just hoping to help people out, right? Somebody's going to go up. Oh, I'm going to play. I don't know, something easy. A lot of these open mics are blues, right? Because the blues forms are very, very easy to learn, and you can play them in any key. If you know, oh, this is going to be a standard 12 bar with a quick 4, you know that means something, and that all you need to know is what key it's in, and you're good to go. And then you can listen to the drums for the rhythm and just go for it. Yeah, somebody will say, oh, well, let's do Sweet Home Chicago in A flat. Okay, great, ready to go, right? And you just hope that the drummer behind you is, solid enough that you can kind of just lay it down with him. But yeah, I met people locally, but I also have, a couple bands. I have one of my own now that I put together, which, like I said, I used to be playing up north with a lot of people. And when I met some great local musicians, like I kind of started connecting with them and sort of picking them out one by one, like this guy's got what I was looking for. Right. And then assembling out of that a band, and we play a lot of 60s and 70s soul and funk, stuff that I loved growing up, Motown and I think up into the disco era, like that stuff I really love. Great bass parts. Yeah. Just a
you
smattering,
play some disco.
Just a smattering. You would do a little Cool in the Gang or something like that. We do Get Down on It. Yeah, we do. And we
celebrate those good times.
Stuff like that. Bobby Womack and Johnny Guitar Watson. We do a little Prince. We do, we do a little bit of modern stuff too. Like here and there, we'll do like John Mayer. We've done Daft Punk. That they had that hit that was really big. We played that because if you got a good rhythm section, it's fun to do those kind of songs. So that's my band. And then also there's another band that I play with now too that is more of a Texas blues kind of band, but they also add in a bit of like real authentic soul flavor. And it's a trio, whereas my band is like, depending on the surroundings, depending on the gig, it's usually 5 or 6 pieces. This other band that I'm in is a trio. And the great thing about being in a trio is that every part matters. Like every player matters. You got drum, bass, and guitar, and it really is like it's a 3-legged table, and without all 3 of the legs working, everything falls apart. So you have to be strong like every minute of every gig. Whereas with, a 5 or 6 piece band or bigger, parts can be, rearranged. Somebody might drop out here and come back in another place. Not usually the bass, but every once in a while, even that is acceptable depending on what you're doing. We use that to our advantage to like have dynamics, right? Where you can like, if the bass drops out for, a few bars, 8 or 16 bars or something, and then you come back in, like the energy, the fact that the energy has changed so drastically, like you've gone from no low frequency information, right, to bringing it back in, like the dynamics of the band change, and it just like reinvigorates everything. So people who are dancing will like dance even harder. It's amazing.
So how do you think we should round this one out? Any last thoughts, epiphanies?
Okay, so I feel like one of the things maybe that we didn't explore, you might want to bring this back into the beginning somehow, like fix it in post, is like our thing about like the way that we used our Gabi sessions, which I don't remember if I've heard you mention this in passing in another one of your podcasts, but the way that we did our meeting notes, where basically like everybody's committed to helping scribe the meeting notes. And then at a certain point, like we had an agreement. Okay, if you leave anybody is free to look over this and edit it, right? Like, should we maybe talk just a minute about that? Just,
yes.
I feel like this got really heavy about my background, and it's so boring. No one's going to care.
No, I drove us there. I wanted to know. I want people to know Paul Frields better. So, no, I think, you hit on something interesting, which is, and I use this without even thinking about it now, but yes, you're right. So, and I think I had a listener that was asking a question, like, how do you do this collaborative meeting thing? So this is another thing that fits in there. Maybe I didn't mention this before. Yeah, so I think steer me if I get this wrong, but I think we came to the place where there was kind of this implicit assumption, and we would say it explicitly, which is we're capturing, and I still do this today, I'm capturing the notes as we go. If you don't like the action item that you got or who we assigned it to, change the notes. I mean, it'd be helpful to raise that with the people who are here so that they can follow along, but change the notes, and you are giving your implicit approval to the minutes by being at this meeting and having access to this. Now it's a shared document, but then it was this Gabi session. And once you leave, that's pretty much like you were here. So the minute you're gone, we assume that whatever was here when the meeting happened while you were here, you agree to, and we're going to send it out. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that is I think that's pretty accurate. And it was about everybody sharing the responsibility. And in that case, I think it was one of those rare occasions where you can have everybody share accountability. Like it's usually hard to do that the way we think of accountability, at least, in a racing model at Red Hat, where one person is accountable, right? I would say one person's accountable for sending out the notes and having to move them on.
Yeah, and in the case of the board, that's really insightful. I had never thought of it that way. Yeah, in the case of the board, it was we as a board, you as a board member and we as a board agree that this is how we want this discussion and this decision to go out to the community. Right.
This is a record of what we talked about. And, that was important if, just so, people don't misunderstand, the object there is not to like wallpaper over things that happen in the meeting, but occasionally, meeting notes will sometimes get into territory that that it's not necessarily appropriate to share with everybody. Like, especially in maybe in the case of, I don't know, maybe there's a case of bad behavior in the community, or maybe there's a personnel issue or a legal issue or something like that. And you may not be able to go into all the detail that you would want to, but at the same time, you want to have something there that's representative of the discussion and the decision. And that shared responsibility for the notes also brought with it the understanding that, okay, we've all recorded this. So if you want to have some say in how this is represented, right, then you're responsible to take a look through the notes and make sure that that's accurate before you leave the session, because anything that happens to these notes up until the time, that they're, that everybody's disperses, right, we're all going to share, we all share the accountability for them.
Yes.
It was an incentive to pay attention and to make sure that things were accurate. And so it was not just about John or Paul, typing fast enough to cover everything, but rather, if there's something wrong here, the person who we're quoting, they may end up getting called on the carpet or asked to answer about what they said. And if we didn't capture it right, certainly we don't want to do that. We want to make sure everything's accurate, but we can't possibly be 100% accurate all the time. So getting everybody to share that responsibility is important.
Well, and I think this is a good close. The practical outcome of this too was, and still today, rarely, if never, does someone reply to the minutes that I'll send out over email saying, that's not what we discussed.
Right.
I mean, I don't know about you, but before doing this, either at Red Hat or in other companies, you have a meeting, someone sends out the notes, and then you spend 25 emails arguing over who really, what the decision was, who really owns it. There's none of that.
Right.
With this approach, there's absolutely, there's no surprises.
Yeah, that's never happened to me either. Yeah, since starting to use that shared note taking, as long as you have that understanding up front and people know what their level of ownership is, I've never had that. I've never had a backlash or any kind of negative outcome from that.
Right, and that's the key part too. Is setting that expectation up front is key to just the overall outcome
for sure.
Well, thanks for coming by today, Paul.
Thanks for having me,
I hope
John.
we can do this again. I really think we need to dive into this tips for remote ease, or we'll come up with some creative clickbait title
I'm here.
Just boost the podcast numbers.
I'm here whenever you want me, man. Any day, any week. You let me know. This is the most fun I've had this week so far.
Fantastic. Thanks for listening to The John Polster Show. Notes, links, and all that other good stuff for this episode are at johnpolster.com/podcast. If you have questions or ideas around the podcast, send those to podcast@johnpolster.com.